So, good morning to all of you from Buenos Aires. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Actually, good afternoon from here. So, we are continuing our series of lectures connected to the conception of divine imperfect and the theological implications that are present there in the Damodara-lila, which extend to our particular instance as sadhakas, as practitioners. So what's the connection, with the bridge between what we can witness in the Nitya Lila, in the context of Bhagavan interacting with his Sarup Shakti eternal associates, and how those things boil down, if you will, to our present situation, aspiring in that direction, but at the same time dealing with certain elements that need to be, as we already mentioned, properly integrated into a higher degree of harmony in order for us to attain a closer situation to the ultimate realm we are aspiring for. So today is our third lecture. So as usual, I will make some brief recap of what we were seeing, studying during previous Monday. And we directed our attention to, based on one quote from one French author, and we spoke a little bit about the conception of first and second naivete. And we connected, of course, such a quote in our particular context as Gaudius, and speaking in terms of the different stages of progress in the devotional realm, Kanishta, Madhyam, and Uttam. So we spoke about the first and second naivete, or innocence, if you will. The first one being connected to Kanishta stage, the beginner's neophyte mindset, and the second naivete more connected to the ultimate expression of reality in the context of being an Uttam, of being, if you will, participating in the Lila and showing some similar symptoms to that of the Kanishta, but actually having made full circle and having gone through the intermediate stage that we mainly concentrated on in the lecture, because we are mainly concerned about that which is the connection with Madhyam, or the intermediate chapter, if we will, in this journey, which has to do, as we describe it, with facing, for example, difficulties, dealing with complexity, and specifically this word we use, integration of complexity. That's a whole interesting concept to define what's the Madhyam psychology. That's a person who is willing to engage in further integration of reality. We also define this complexity as sometimes necessary suffering, something that we need to go through. And actually it's not suffering, strictly speaking, but we may perceive it as such in the context of something that has not been yet fully solved in the realm of, again, complexity, and the proper simplification of complexity in the form of integration, not simplification in a cheap way, not an evasive device or whatever. So we spoke about how this suffering, this idea of suffering that sometimes we perceive in us, and of course we may perceive coming from others, our so-called enemies, obstacles, all of this that we may perceive as such, some negative force hitting us, actually refers to non-integrated complexity in our own self, in our own world, if you will. Now, some complexity which has not been yet integrated and which is begging for integration. So we should be compassionate, if you will, develop some sense of empathy, some kindness towards that integration that begs to be integrated, that complexity, that begs to be integrated, and in order to reach a higher level of, again, harmony, higher synthesis of reality. And Vrindavan Braj is the ultimate expression of this dynamics, where at every single moment, every single day, at every instance and breathing breath, whatever is coming to them in whatever form, it's perfectly put in some place in the context of the center, of course. That's Braj, whatever, that place when everything is possible, everything is finding its proper place. And interestingly, in the context of achieving such a realm, we have our own metaphysics, as Gaudiya called Achintya Veda, Aved, as you may know. Inconceivable, simultaneous unity and diversity between Bhagavan and his Shaktis, basically, in brief words, of course. But this idea, the very idea of Achintya Veda Ved, also speaks about this integration. This integration, not disintegration. Because it's speaking about Bhed, Abhed. Immediately the concept is hitting that point. Difference and non-difference. And the two of them are living together in one context. Other systems, other philosophical systems are schools of thought in the realm of Vedanta, for example, Ramanuja or whatever, Sankara or Madhva. They will present other systems with actually their attempt to integrate or harmonize is by disintegrating something. For example, Advaita Vedanta. Sankara will try to disintegrate Dvaita or form of variety. So he only will go for Advaita, Abhed, non-difference, unity, non-duality. Madhva, on the opposite, will go against him and say Dvaita. We will disintegrate Advaita, unity, and let's go with Dvaita, Abhed, difference, duality. But our, again, school of thought has to do mainly with seeking for integration of everything, whatever we may perceive as contradictory. And we are trying to reach, again, that point, that realm, that, as Guru Maharaj will say, that degree of penetration in transcendence, where everything finds its proper place. And that's transcendence, actually. This idea is really connected with the concept of integration. Transcending something means integrating something into a higher, again, equation or synthesis. Transcending something doesn't mean to dismiss. Transcendence is not dismissal at all. It's not an evasive feature of our practice. Actually, it's proper integration. That's really transcendence. And that's why the ultimate peak, apex of transcendence, again, if transcendence is integration, it means the highest realm of transcendence will be the place where we find the highest degree of integration. And that's Vrindavan again. We find how so many so-called contradictions are living together in perfect peace and harmony in the bucolic setting of Braj, of the village life of Braj. But so many complexities are present there, actually. So much knowledge, so much Aishvarya, so much renunciation, actually, and so many things coming and going, but everything perfectly integrated by the strength of, again, of course, love. Of course, this integration is, integration is something gradual. It's not from one day to another. So spiritual advancement has to do with that. If we want to speak in terms of spiritual advancement, that means integration of different levels of complexity that are higher and higher. That's a way of speaking about I am advancing spiritually. I have integrated this level of complexity, and tomorrow a new level will be there, and the day after tomorrow something more, and all of this will converge eventually, ultimately, in the realm of Raj. So all this is quite connected to the Damodara-lila, which, as you know, is part of the hub in our series around which we are trying to revolve, and on all the details of the Krishna conception and how it plays out in connection to Yashoda, the Brajavas in this case. Krishna there being, in the terms of Rupa Goswami, Akila Rasamrita Murti, which means the perfect form that is able to receive all varieties of rasa, all types of love, all complexities, all different varieties, diversity, complexity of affection. All of those things are directed to the same person, And he has the capacity to receive them, if you will, to integrate them in himself and become who he is. As we know, Krishna is a byproduct of the love of his devotees. He's a byproduct of the Brajavasis prem. His very form, transcendental form, is, if you will, poetically speaking, is being carved by the prem of the Brajavasis. So all those different types of prem are coming to him, and that gives us a result, Braja Krishna, if you will. So he's receiving all these types of affection, he's integrating them in the perfect way, and thus, of course, if we want to live with such an object of love, we are also, it is expected from us that we may also develop certain capacity to inhabit that realm and to integrate also all those types of affections that are coming into this, the strength, the force of Vatsalya and Madhurya and Sakya, that sometimes that may be even referred to as some of them enemy rasas between themselves. But this doesn't mean that, I don't know, the gopis are angry with Jashoda or whatever. But actually, it's on a certain level, this is described as such, but on another level, so much harmony is there, so much harmony. And in this Damodara-lila in particular, we find these so-called opposites, like immanence and transcendence, and Krishna being there, remaining in his classical size, human-like size, but at the same time, 2 fingers too short in the robe. And some while ago, as you remember, Krishna opened his mouth just to sing uncountable universes. So many things that are living together in this Vrindavan, in this Lila realm. So also, sorry, I'm giving some recap, but also some new ideas come on the way. So those are my recaps you must already know, but this time. We also spoke about the idea of, in this context, in the context of integration and so on, the concept of inclusivity. And that's another way of approach the expression of the idea of integration. And so we must be ready to attain, in order to become proper devotee, proper, a progressive madhyam. And even though we may not be in madhyam now, even we have to aspire in that direction before entering the realm of uttam, of being an uttamadhikari. So attaining greater inclusivity, we mentioned before, we get too exclusive in the details of our theology, in other words. Because if we want to become ekagra, one-pointed into the higher degree, higher reach of our sampradaya, and just absorbed in the dynamics of the lila, before getting too exclusive in that direction, you should develop some inclusivity regarding what's going on around you, the different, again, varieties and moods, and integrate them properly. Because if there is not that inclusivity, your so-called exclusivity will become some form of fanaticism, sectarianism, or whatever. So you have to integrate all those things that on certain stage, again, you will perceive them as enemies. And that's why Christ said, love your enemies, forgive your enemies. Love your enemies means integrate the non-resolved complexities in your life. So a madhyam is such a person which has the capacity, in the words of Srila Sri Maharaj, to live with gray. Srila Sri Maharaj was a man of grays, if you will. He was not black and white. I like and don't like one extreme, the other, but he was being able to live happily with all these nuanced possibilities of life. On one side, you can be very traditional regarding your own legacy, devotional legacy, Shastra, Guru, Purvacharyas, and so on. But at the same time, you can and you should become eventually progressive at the same time, and dealing with those two things properly, walking in this tightrope in a balanced way, entering also, we spoke, entering into the unknown realm of paradox and get out of your comfort zone. That has to do with entering into the realm of complexity, integrate complexity, become inclusive. Different words for the same idea, for pounding this same exact post. So it's a whole unknown realm for us, for sure. And it's calling us, but that call is the call of Krishna's flute call. Actually, is a call for getting out of your comfort zone. You cannot realize the gopis are hearing the flute, and everything is left behind. They don't give a second thought to that. Of course, we cannot imitate that, but we should understand that we should be willing to gradually engage in this Sarva Dharma Parityaja, which means get out of your comfort zone, basically. Leave whatever you are now identified with, and that's retaining you here, and it's not allowing you to enter the higher sphere of experience. To a Madhyam is willing to do that, entering the unknown realm of paradox, of those things that do not fit but need to, and you are willing to engage your life into that project, if you will. So a Madhyam is willing to do this, and in this way a Madhyam Adhikari gradually will be able to leave dualistic thinking, which means, as we also explained, when you have dualistic thinking, you are comparing stuff, people, situations. One way you are labeling them, and eventually you are judging them. You are passing judgments. I like this, I don't like this. It's good, it's bad, and the realm of duality is born again. And from that comes fear, as the Bhagavatam say. So a Madhyam is someone who is living, preparing more and more to leave this world, which means to leave fear, to leave duality, and enter the real unity, not the debate of Shankar, but the harmony of Achintya Vedabhed. And again, if you are not willing to do this, if you want just to jump from the first naivety to the second, from Kanistha to Uttam, and you don't want to be a complex, progressive, gray man, woman, Madhyam, then that's a form of Sahajism, as we mentioned, to jump from one stage to the other without going through all the different tunnels that you need to experience. So Sahajism is a way of cheap love, easy going experience in bhakti. So we shouldn't be sahajas in that sense. That's another variety of being a sahaja, easy like person. So from naivety 1, as we say, to naivety 2, there is no non-stop flight. There has to be a stop, and that will be in the intermediate stage of Madhyam and dealing with complexity. So first develop this integration. First we have to develop this inclusivity, before we get too exclusive, because if not, Sahajism is there, fanaticism, fundamentalism. So that was our conclusion in our previous meeting, and I think these are important points, and that's why I'm repeating them again, so sorry for that. But if we want to be a progressive sadhaka, we need to learn how to integrate complexity. And for that, we quoted the famous verse of Rupa Goswami, which spoke about how the snake is moving in a crooked way, and Srila Srimara is saying the snake, love, moves like a snake, actually, in that way, because on its way, it's harmonizing everything on both sides of the road, if you will, all accommodating, all harmonizing, all integrating, everything. And that's the point we ended last class, and we will begin from there today. The love and the movement of bhakti and the movement of a progression practitioner is finding purpose in everything. Everything has a purpose, so everything is worthy of being integrated, of making it part of my life, of my project. Because generally when we reject something, it's basically because we are not finding any purpose to that, or we think it goes against my own purpose. So the word purpose is artha, and paramartha means the higher purpose, the ultimate one, prem. So a Madhyam is a progressive devotee who is seeing everything in connection to the center, at least in theory, and knows reality is such. So she is willing to make this connection, this sambandha, actually. Sambandha means the conceptual orientation that allows me to integrate everything. And that's avideya, that's how I should engage in bhakti in order to reach prayojan, or the goal. Sambandha means everything, sambandha, linked, connected to the center. So that means everything has a purpose in connection to the center. And if everything has a purpose, everything is worthy of being integrated. Everything is worthy of being included into whatever is coming on my way into a higher plan. So today we will continue with this important idea of purpose, meaning, and how this goes hand by hand, and how this will help us a lot in order to increase our level of, again, inclusivity, integration, and threading this path of trying to be a proper intermediate bhakta in order to reach the ultimate standing in Prem Bhakti. So I read some interesting quote from T.S. Eliot. Some of you may know this writer. So he says something in connection to purpose, the idea of purpose. He said, we had the experience, but missed the meaning. An approach to the meaning restores the experience. So I find that very interesting, because that can happen in bhakti. You can have experience, you can go through things, through the motions of daily world or life in bhakti on some level. But if you're not extracting meaning, if you're not going to that specific active principle, if you will, the experience doesn't afford too much insight, if you will. Experience generally should be connected to insight. If not, it's just going through the motions externally. Now, interestingly, in Sanskrit, the word experience is translated as anubhava. And bhava means, as you know, emotion, and anu means to follow. So anubhava means generally to follow the emotions of someone else, to connect with someone who has a certain emotion, in the case of bhakti, and that emotion will eventually come to you. So we are speaking about something, not doing something physically externally only, but connect with that inner realm. So this quote is saying that you can go through an experience, but you are missing the meaning. Maybe you are giving yourself a meaning to that which is wrong. You are not getting the inherent, intrinsic meaning of the experience. So approach to the meaning restores the experience. Even if you have gone in the past, sometimes happens. You have gone something in your life in the past, and that's traumatic for you till today, years after that. And why there is trauma? Because you are not able to, you have missed the real meaning, the ultimate meaning of that happened to you. So you need to go back to that situation and approach the meaning that still is waiting there for us. And that will restore the experience, if you will, and that will restore us. And we need to be restored people in order to engage in bhakti. We need to be fully human, as Guru Maharaj will say, and fully divine eventually. Because before we want to become holy, now we have to be whole. If you want to make some pun play of words, first try to be whole, in one sense, in the context of trying to be holy, saintly. So purpose, in the same way that our body cannot live without food. We know that. We are in Kali Yuga, in this age, you cannot retain your life in the nervous system and in the prana and in the bones as other ages. You need concrete food. So in the same way that the body cannot live without food, the soul cannot live without meaning. That should be an important and interesting parallel. Meaning is the food of the soul. Try to see that stat. Meaning, purpose is that which is actually feeding our atma, our devotional project. So the main concern for us or for humans in general is not so much like enjoying pleasure as we may think, of course, dharma, artha, kamas, all this stuff. It's not enjoying pleasure, and it's not avoiding pain. Generally, those are the two tracks, as Guru Maharaj will say, on which material life is going. Bhogantya, enjoyment and avoiding suffering. Enjoyment and avoiding suffering. But actually, the ultimate concern for us is to find meaning in life, to find purpose. And we know that. Of course, sometimes we may say, we may speak in terms, what's the meaning of life? Like expecting one answer. So we have the answer and we already know. But something very different is to find meaning in life at every single moment and to be able to extract the proper meaning of every chapter of life, if you will. That's really to find meaning in life, just not having an official, if you will, professional sutra-like reply. The meaning of life is to develop love with God. Shri Shri Radha and Krishna, Prem Bhakti. I know what's the meaning of life. Yeah, but you have to, that's okay. But what should you do with such a concept? You have to be able to go through your daily motions, daily schedule, and be able to find meaning in those moments in connection to the ultimate meaning of life. Again, sometimes we can speak in terms of short term, middle term, long term purpose of things. Everything is connected to the ultimate long-term purpose. Everything again converges in the Damodara-lila. But how here to deal with our daily situation in such a way that that will take us in that direction. So this concept of purpose is very important. So we need to find purpose in life. Guru Maharaj will say that. Who is more crazy? The one who say that there is no meaning, but still they are looking for meaning? Or those who say, again, there is meaning and they're after that. They're after such a purpose in life and they find it. That's the important point here. And of course, we choose to align ourselves with the latter. So again, the search for meaning is really deep. I remember in every single stage. Now I'm speaking a little bit generally here, and of course we try to connect with our own life as Gaudiyas and Sadhakas. But even in general way, human beings again are after meaning, are obsessed with that. I remember having read a very, very important, very nice book, very intense one. Maybe some of you may have read it. It's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. If you never read it, I really recommend that to you. That's a short book, but it's very intense. Viktor Frankl is the one who developed logotherapy, which is a whole psychological system on the basis of finding meaning to life and restoring one's psychic health on such foundation. And his background is really, how to say, speaks for him as a psychologist and as a human being. He was a spiritualist as well. So he was basically a prisoner. He was prisoner in the concentration camp in the Nazi times. And the book is basically his diary of what happened there and how he told. The only way I was able to survive such a thing was to find meaning. For some particular reason, I'm going through this experience. And he said, I was seeing that most of the people who died there, basically they left themselves. No? They stopped trying to live because they stopped finding meaning in whatever was going on because it was such a crazy thing that they could no longer retain some idea of purpose in this. And at that point, they started to die, if you will. So indirectly, he's emphasizing indirectly as well how important it is to find meaning, even if you are going through the most difficult times of your life, especially. And we know that our scriptures also present themselves in such a context. Existential crisis. Parikshit Maharaj just about to die, being cursed to die in some days. Arjuna having to battle with his dearmost, his greatest attachments, and all these really complex settings. So we are living in particular times in this connection. No? When we speak about purpose and about meaning and the search for meaning, we could say that every single time in history, in history of human life, every time has its own collective neurosis, if you will. You can choose one for every different time. And all of them requires their specific type of therapy to go through that, to transcend that. So I will say that in these particular times we are living now, the last decades, even centuries maybe, the existential void, if you will, or the lack of meaning is the main collective neurosis that is affecting the most often our present times. It's some form of nihilism. Now we find so many, of course, philosophies that are proposing that everything has no meaning, everything is absurd. Nihilism, basically, some lack of purpose in whatever is going on, and that's really embedded into the present time. So that can affect the sadhaka even though you may officially say, I have my meaning in life. You have to walk the talk, as we always say. So people, again, even though you may be having this crisis, still you cannot live without meaning. That's the main point. You need to create some meaning. People create some meaning. Some people, on one level, you can see some people end with their lives, commit suicide because they conclude life has no purpose. So what's the purpose to continue? Some other may continue with that idea, but some other will finished their life because they were not able to find any longer some purpose, some meaning. Some other people, instead of killing themselves, may just go crazy, go mad. Because that's an interesting point. They were not able to find purpose to life in the context of not being crazy. So they find a purpose to their existence out of the context of being sober, if you will. So they find a purpose to life being mad, but they are after purpose. Some other people will get intoxicated and they will find some meaning in that experience. They are trying to extract, again, the underlying situation here is everyone is trying to extract some meaning from reality. In the context of being drunk, in the context of smoking pot, in the context of becoming mad. The point is we cannot live without purpose. We cannot live without meaning. Because meaning is the point, and this is further confirming there is meaning actually, and that's why we cannot live with it. Krishna will say sometimes, those things that exist will always exist, those things that do not exist will never exist. So we could say in that sense, meaning has always existed, will always exist. And that's why whenever we are not able to find that, we feel we cannot continue living. On different levels, of course. No, not everyone wants to kill themselves or going crazy, but you experience some sort of anxiety, this disturbance, and the point is how we are interpreting that, no? Because we may blame others, lose faith, and get exceedingly in anxiety, and of course, none of them are the ideal options here. So we need purpose, and that's important in our devotional project as well. 1 second, with the camera. Okay. So, I mean, we are not designed, if you will, inherently our DNA cannot deal with engaging in endeavors in different projects without meaning. Try to imagine that. I will start to do something that has no meaning for me. Actually, the very reason why you are doing whatever you're doing is because it has some meaning to you. There is you were able to find some meaning, and that's keeping you from living such a practice. You're there. Even so-called, I remember art movements decades ago, like surrealism, I think you call in English, Dadaism, even. Their main motto, their main idea was, we will find the non-meaning as their central expression of their artistic work. No, let's find non-meaning. But again, ultimately they are trying to find some type of meaning. Actually, they were not trying to abolish all meaning, but to rediscover, not like to go beyond the standard so-called meaning and to find meaning in non-meaning and so on. But the point is, we can't escape that. Meaning is embedded in reality. So this is very important. Again, let's maintain the topic in the proper context for us to be able to integrate whatever is touching us, coming to us. So we need, everything has a meaning, and we have a meaning, of course. We have a purpose, purposeful entities. Again, above our survival tendency, the survival of the fittest, if you will, or even above that, we won't be willing to live if we feel that there is no meaning, we have no meaning. I think there in the US, for the ones who live in the United States, I think that you have a website for like suicide prevention. And I think the name of the website is You Matter. So that says everything. I mean, as long as you feel you don't matter, you are getting closer to the thought of, I will commit suicide, I will kill myself. But as much as you realize I matter, again, not from a selfish, proud way, but from a proper perspective, life finds its place, or we find our place in life. So as we mentioned before, when we speak about meaning, we are not speaking about ideally as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because in the general world, people will say, okay, you find the meaning that most inspires you and you be happy with that. And again, this can take you to become basically crazy. You find a meaning in that context, you're happy with that, but you are in the madhouse, if you will. But for us as Gaudias, we are not so much after giving meaning to stuff, but actually discovering the inherent purpose, the inherent meaning and message that reality is having there. And when I say reality, of course, we don't want to sound abstract. We are speaking about in a personal way. Krishna is there, and his message is coming through everything, as we will see. So we don't need to give purpose to things, but to discover the inherent purpose in everything. That's a very exciting, if you will, game, play. Everything has some inherent purpose. And of course, I have to approach the environment in such a way that the environment is willing to reveal, as Maharaj will say, it's secrets to me. As sometimes the English quote says, no, that generally most people don't see things as they are, but they see things as they are, as they think they are, I will say. So they are projecting their own idea of meaning, but actually, again, life already has some meaning. We could say that the purpose of life has an unconditional character. The purpose of life is possessed of unconditional character, if you will. I mean, there will be always some purpose in life beyond what I would like to imagine and create and project and so on. And as Guru Maharaj will say, we are a unit as well of meaning. So we are part of the meaning, the purpose equation, if you will. We're a unit of potential. That's another way of speaking about meaning, interestingly. Because what we are, why we matter, has to do with our potential. It has to do with how we deal with our environment and ultimately as bhaktas with the Swarup Shakti. And all those things, our own potential and those things that are waiting for us are to be extracted in the now, in the present moment. That's an important point. When the present moment has a deep, how to say, ontological density. There is a deep ontological density in the present that is not there in the past, in the future. Whenever your mind disappears from the present and is in tamas, nostalgia in the past, rajas, desire projected in the future. Sattva has to do mainly with dealing with the reality in the here and now. And there is a deep ontological, again, density in the present that will afford us certain experiences that we cannot live in any other moment. I mean, you can only have a real experience and extract real meaning trying to deal with things in the present moment. And if you go to the past to solve some past issue and try to extract meaning from that, that will be done from the perspective of the present moment. So we need to be able in the present moment to deal with that. And I'm not promoting just like a mindfulness seminar and that's all, but it has its advantages. Mindfulness mainly means try to be here now. It sounds easy, but we have to learn to do that, especially in our particular tradition, our practice. One of our main practices, the chanting Krishna's names, japa, for example, which is a very meditation-like practice. And I've heard so many times about this, and I'm not saying I'm free from that, of course, but becoming bored through the chanting. I know I stopped chanting japa because I get bored. And what's boredom? Boredom, you say? That's just a thought in your mind. That's an idea you have. And you are not dismissing that, and you are giving a lot of weight and attention. And of course, that takes the form of I stopped chanting altogether because I really identify with that. But the point is why? No, I heard that many times. I stopped chanting because I do not feel anything. No? Or whatever, so many things. So that has to do with unattentive chanting, and we know. And what's the point? Why our chanting is inattentive? Of course, many things we could say. Uncontrolled mind and blah, blah, blah. But I will say in this context, it means we are not able to find purpose to whatever we are doing at that moment. The present moment, chanting japa has to be done in the present moment. I cannot sit and chant japa and have my mind traveling doing shopping in the future tense, the past tense, traveling here and there, you're not chanting japa. You are traveling somewhere else. So you have to be in the present moment, and you have to be able to extract meaning of whatever you are doing in that present moment. In this case, chanting japa, which is such a significant thing. I mean, you are trying to develop your commitment and relationship with Sri Sri Radha and Krishna in the form of their names. They are fully present there, willing to give their full mercy. And we have to adopt the proper attitude to honor their presence. So many things to extract, so much meaning and purpose in that present moment of chanting. But if we are not dealing with that purpose and meaning, of course, for our mind, it will be a torture, because the mind cannot do something that has no purpose. So mind will travel immediately somewhere else, will be running to some thought, to some situation that has some purpose. Try to observe yourself when you are trying to chant, and when the mind runs somewhere else, you try to realize, why my mind ran there? If what I'm doing is so purposeful. And the point is, I stopped finding purpose at one given moment, and that's why my mind runs somewhere else. That's the basic idea. So and of course, bringing the mind back means rediscovering purpose in whatever I'm doing, in this case, chanting Hari's name. And that's a constant exercise to rediscover and to go back to the meaning and to go back to the purpose, to the ultimate purpose and the ultimate meaning. Because generally when the mind runs, it is not running to some ultimate meaning stuff, but to more relative things that you can extract some type of meaning in a more cheap way. But here we are trying to go deep in our chanting, in our prayer, in our meditation. That's a big, tough adventure. But the point is, again, we cannot do something without purpose. Actually, if we insist on doing something without purpose, that will kill our bhakti, I would say. In one sense, niyama graha. That's Rupa Goswami's language. That's one of the 6 things that will attack, if you will, go against your bhakti. And what does mean niyama graha? One of the meanings is to do something without understanding its meaning, basically. Without purpose, doing something externally, engaging in some devotional like actions, but without really fathoming its depth, its purpose. So if you repeat that and you create some scars in that sense and some habits in that sense, that becomes, you develop a certain personality in that context and in time, that will be impossible to sustain. Or if you sustain such a project, that won't be healthy for your bhakti. So again, we see how the idea of being able to draw meaning, to find purpose in whatever we are doing is so crucial. If Rupa Goswami is saying, if you don't find purpose and you keep acting without that, that will affect your bhakti negatively. Of course, he's saying, if you are doing the opposite, that will affect your bhakti positively. It's clear. So value means again artha in Sanskrit. And prem, divine love, is called sometimes paramartha, or divine, ultimate, supreme purpose. You will find that in divine love. Divine love speaks of everything has a purpose in the context of lila. Again, here we are traveling for a moment to Vrindavan. And in connection to this, we have the word anartha. Anartha. Sometimes we find that we translate that as obstacle or contamination, but we could say anartha means a false sense of value. That's how, or a false sense of purpose, or a false sense of meaning. Anartha doesn't mean that does not only mean I do not find any purpose, but also means I think I found some purpose, but I actually reading the situation in the wrong way. Like avidya. Avidya doesn't only mean lack of knowledge, non-education, ignorance. Avidya means wrong and misapprehension of things, wrong understanding of something. I think I know, but actually have the wrong idea. So that's worse than to be in zero without any knowledge at all. So anartha has to do with something like that. Anartha means I may be entertaining a false sense of meaning and purpose and value in life. So I need to replace that with a proper understanding of what's really valuable and so on. This could be connected to Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu's third stanza of Shikshastakam, famous verse for many reasons, and this is one of them. Now he's seeing the whole world as a guru, and he's approaching nature and the world with a proper attitude, and the result is Trinada Pisunichena, Tadora Pisishna, Amani Namanadena. Everything is sharing purpose to him. He's finding purpose in the grass, in the tree, and everything is speaking to him in connection to, again, higher and higher developments. So he's, and this way he's able to integrate everything. Again, we go back to this idea of integration, and we can connect even, sorry if I become a little bit obsessed with etymology, but when you speak about having integrity in your life, well, I don't think that's too far from speaking about integrating complexity and so on. If you want integrity, it has to do with your capacity of integrating all the things. Wholeness, as we mentioned before. Holy, but wholeness as well. So all this is connected with being a Madhyam. This third verse of Shikshastakam that we are speaking about now represents a stage of Nishta. And Nishta is quite connected always by our acharyas with the stage of being a Madhyam Adhikar. Before Nishta, generally, one will be mainly considered Bhukanishta in general terms, of course. So it's very interesting. This verse of Shikshastakam is speaking about being a Madhyam, progressive thinker, practitioner, being able to extract meaning, integrate complexity, find purpose to everything. And that will strengthen our faith, Nishta. Our faith will become well informed, not fanatical, as we mentioned before, not sentimental, not sahaja, but firm faith, nishtita. So it's important. Some words and meaning I want to share. Give me some more minutes. I think we have some minutes before going for Q&A. So instead of, again, trying, I remember also Viktor Frankl mentioned something like that in his book. Let me go to his book. I'm doing some short promotion and trailer to tempt you to read it. But he will say things like this, that man shouldn't question about the meaning of life, but understand that life is in questioning him. No, the question is coming, and we are to answer that. And he says, only from the vantage point of personal commitment, you can reply back to life, he will say. I found that really interesting. I mean, those are deep insights, even though you may not be a Gaudiya. Only from the vantage point of personal commitment, you can reply back to life. You can dialogue with reality. If you want, you can say you can eventually speak with Krishna. That's another way of saying ultimately, if you want to speak with Krishna, deal with Krishna, play with Krishna. Okay, first you have to learn how to dialogue and hear and speak to whatever is coming through you. And of course, Krishna is involved there some level or another, because everything is connected to the center, Sambandha. So life is interrogating us, is questioning us in different ways. So we should be able to reply back from the vantage point of personal responsibility. Viktor Frankl will say something like that in that connection. And personal responsibility has to do with finding meaning in whatever is happening in my life. I have to become responsible, committed to myself, even to begin with. So he will say that when a man discovers, and he says that mainly from his own vantage point, what he had to go through in this concentration camp and how he was able to survive such a thing. He said that when a man discovers that his destiny, if you want to call that karma, when a man discovers, or a lady, of course, that his destiny, her destiny is to suffer, sometimes he had to go through that, no doubt. He has to accept that suffering, because that suffering becomes his unique and peculiar task. What's more, he says, that suffering gives him the character of a unique and unrepeatable person in the universe. No one can redeem you from your suffering or suffer in your place. Thus, when a person is accepted as an unrepeatable, irreplaceable being, then the responsibility that man assumes for the meaning of his existence arises in all its significance. So for me, these are really moving quotes. And with your permission, I will share them in the chat for the ones who would like to do copy paste, share, or meditate on that all the time you may like to do it. But here you have a person who is speaking, he's walking the talk. He has gone through the worst scenario you can ever possibly imagine, because if you really read his book, you start to become ashamed of how much you suffer and lament for such tiny things. And he went through such a situation, and he's coming back alive with such a deep insight. He has such a capacity to extract the meaning of something that had no meaning apparently. It was totally against whatever may have wished. So he was able to survive in this way. Okay, I have to suffer. I have to go through this. I cannot escape this. So that has become my unique task now. That's my business now. I have to go through that in such a way that I'm sure, since life's purpose is unconditionally present there, some purpose will arise here. Even though if I may not be able to draw that yet, I know it's there. I have that conviction. So eventually, if I act with such faith, if you will, that purpose will make its place. And again, for him, it was the case. He developed a whole psychological system on the basis of this. So in other words, the point here, he's speaking about suffering, especially because that was his experience, and that's our experience on one level or another. Maybe we have not been in a concentration camp, but maybe we are suffering with the same intensity that he was suffering in the concentration camp, or even more. Because it doesn't have to do so much with what's going on outside. So, the point here is that suffering will stop being suffering, in one sense, so to say, as much as whenever we are able to find meaning to that. That's the point. You may be suffering, we may be suffering on some level here and there, but whenever we are able to grasp some purpose in that, suffering starts to become something else. Sacrifice has to do with that so many occasions. Some suffering is involved, but some purpose is involved as well, and it attains a higher level, higher expression. So again, with this, we are not promoting avoidable suffering, as they will. As I say, I'm not promoting masochism. So the point is that for suffering to confer some sense, some purpose, it has to be an avoidable suffering. That's my point. As the case of Viktor Frankl, he had to go through something he was not able to avoid. It was absolutely necessary for him to go through that. That's the conclusion. Some purpose was there, and he was able to extract that. So whenever you accept that unavoidable suffering in that spirit, meaning will come and suffering will stop. But of course, the avoidable suffering, as I mentioned, or the unnecessary suffering, as we have said before, this suffering that can be avoided have to be avoided. You have to deal with that with the proper tools and remedies, if you will, because if you are not doing that, that will be mainly a symptom of masochism and not a symptom of heroism. So we need to be heroes, and to be hero in part means this point. Unavoidable suffering is there, so I have to find meaning in that. That's really to be a hero, a real hero. So meaning has to do with that. And interestingly, and give me some more minutes, some few ideas before finishing. In connection to this, we find the word sattva. We spoke before about sattva in connection to the present moment. So sattva sometimes is translated as goodness or intelligibility, and so many ideas, balance, equilibrium. But again, going back to the etymology, sattva, sat means existence, beingness, and tva means ness, But in English you say ness, playfulness, and so on, crookedness. So sattva will be beingness, even though that word is not existing. I'm coining it right now. So sattva is really connected. And again, I'm speaking about sattva. I'm not yet speaking about Vishuddha, sattva, and transcendence. But in context of sattva, sattva is quite connected to the idea of deriving meaning, extracting purpose. The idea of being constantly learning. Interestingly, how Krishna described the symptoms of sattva in the Gita. He's saying sattva is mainly characterized by an experience of happiness, a knowledge and happiness, an experience of knowledge and happiness. he's not saying someone in sattva is constantly incorporating knowledge, is reading too much. He's not speaking about that. He says he's experiencing constantly knowledge. So what does it mean? And it's a knowledge that takes the person to happiness. So the idea of knowledge in this case has to do with purpose. Sattva means you're able to constantly be learning, to learn from experience, to learn from whatever is happening to you. That type of knowledge you are extracting in sattva. That's a state of consciousness in which whatever is happening to you, instead of putting knowledge and knowledge and knowledge, you are extracting purpose, learning from experience. And that's why sattva is characterized as always accompanied by knowledge and happiness. And that has to be refined in connection to transcendence, of course. And we will be able to continue doing these same things in Krishna Bhakti. Because again, Prem, the ultimate goal of Krishna Bhakti is Paramartha, ultimate meaning. So if sattva is so connected with this, what to speak about Prem? Implies supreme purpose. And again, supreme integration. I'm trying to make full circle with today's topic and even the topics of last class. We're speaking about Braj. Braj, again, is everything is possible. Damodara-lila is allowing us to witness such an idea. Everything is possible. Rope is 2 fingers too short, but Krishna is not expanding himself, and the situation continues, and just so that keeps trying. Eventually, she's able to tie him. So many things that for a moment seem impossible, eventually possible. Whatever happens there has deep meaning for everyone, always. That's the point. You try to imagine, if something like this happens in sattva, what must be the experience of the Brajavasis? There must be extracting very deep connections at every single moment. Everything they are seeing in the eye of their trance, in their obsession, obsessive love for Krishna. Everything is creating so many, again, links with their object of their love at every moment, without interruption, always increasing. But again, we cannot fathom, imagine that. And the only way we will start to conceive that is by starting here now, walking in that direction. So we have to become gradually more saintly and more whole. As much saintly we become, as much we try to serve God exclusively. That's an interesting point also. Like when as close you get to saintliness, you will be more inclined to serve God, and you will forget the things that take you to be saint. Of course, in the beginning, you have to have that clear. But eventually, your focus will go to give pleasure to Him. At that stage, the Brajavasis are not thinking, I will act in such a way that may be favorable for Krishna's will. I mean, you are doing that. No? Because if you just only concentrate on the things that take you to be a saint, it's very possible that you may end with some sort of perfectionist personality, but not a saintly personality. So here we're also dealing with this. Be careful in the name of doing things good, right, and proper, and for the pleasure of Krishna. Don't develop some perfectionist complex. But we have to end up being saintly people, whole people, and holy people. And we see again the perfection of this in Braj. It seems it's a life with no sense. They are not wondering about purpose in life. They are going through self-forgetfulness in divine love. So that's a really deep things. And that's what we call lila. Again, the converging point of all purpose. Lila is another way of speaking of that. Lila seems no purpose, if you will. It's a play. Play generally has no purpose to attain. It's just play, just celebration of life, celebration of fullness. Kirtan has to do with that, a celebration of life. You find meaning. You got to the point of meaning in such a way that now you are just celebrating in that context. So Lila has to do with that. It's an eternal game. Externally, it takes the form of not too much commitment. They're just enjoying. Again, Krishna Lila seems like that, but it's full of commitment, full of idealism, full of responsibility. And the Gaur Lila, that shows itself a little bit more overtly for our benefit. The Brajavas appearing as sadhakas there. So again, the Nitya-Siddhas, a Brajavasi will do this naturally, will lead their life in Lila naturally, spontaneously, finding purpose in everything. Again, so that's it. Or an Uttamadhikari, let's say, someone on that stage will do that naturally. On the other side, a Kanishta-adhikari will think, I'm doing this naturally, but actually maybe doing that in a sentimental way. So in other words, he's not doing this exercise. And a Madhyam will be in between the two, struggling for doing all the things in the proper way. So maybe most probably we have to go through that healthy struggle. And as we already mentioned, we need to be you a Gaudiya or whatever tradition, no matter which tradition you belong to, we have to do our homework in this regard. In other words, we won't become saintly, we won't become mystic, sage. We won't be able to claim rights to the specifics of our ultimate ideal before doing this homework. So as sometimes I say, you have to inhabit all of these concepts. We have so many concepts, so many high concepts in our tradition especially, but we have to inhabit those concepts. We have to walk the talk through this exercise, through all the things that we are speaking here. And this will imply some type of, just 1 minute more and I'm finishing. This will imply some sort of, we may call it new coherence. We have to be coherent. The very word speaks about uniting and connecting. Some in scientific terms, contemporary quantum physics will speak about unified field, which will be inclusive, again, of paradoxes, so-called contradictions, and creating this higher integration, finding deeper level of purpose. And that will have to do with reaching this second naivete, again, ultimately Krishna Lila, which is the ultimate naivete. Krishna in Mukdata, overwhelmed state, and everyone in Braj, similar to that. This return to simplicity, return, quote unquote, of course, we are not falling from Golok. But we went through some type of simplicity or innocence in our childhood years. Of course, that was a karmic mukdata. So now we want to enter into the real one, to the real innocence, to the real simplicity. But first, we will do that after having learned from all the complexity that we have to deal with now as sadhakas, progressive, hopefully madhyam bhaktas, with that idea in mind. Because if we don't do that, again, and sorry, I will pound the post before finishing, we only will remain, we will be those first naives who are trying to jump to the second naivete, but without dealing with the intermediate complexity. And in this way, in the name of that, we are representing the tradition. Actually, we will be misrepresenting our whole tradition in other shade of sahajism, fundamentalism, and that's totally unbecoming. And of course, that happens a lot in every tradition. And that's why it's needed real mystics, real elders that may properly represent this. So all this, I think, is a necessary foundation work, underlying understanding for Krishna Lila, for us to understand really Krishna Lila, because Krishna Lila is theologically really complex. Even though it seems overtly so simple, it's quite complex. It's integrating so much complexity, as I say. There we will find such a full synthesis of everything, of so-called opposites. Again, we find, as we already studied, and with this I'm finishing, I promise, in our Raga Varma Chandrika, as you may recall, how we spoke about how much Aishwarya is there in Vrindavan. Extreme Aishwarya, Sarvajñata, complexity, but at the same time, extreme Madhurya, intimacy, Muktata, simplicity. The two of them living together, but no tension. There's no tension. Or we could speak in terms of a creative tension that keeps the lila moving and everything expanding. So on one side, we have that place that is harmonizing all this, that is our goal, and we are here wanting to go there, if you will. So we have to arrive there without sahajism, without sentimentalism, without fundamentalism. So in order to do so and to really walk in that direction, we have to be able to learn how to integrate, again, this complexity of all the things we are speaking here, or of Tattva and Siddhanta. That's a complex chapter to go through. As much as we can, of course, as much as our brain is helping, Tattva and Siddhanta is important to be understood and properly digested. And that may take us to complex moments. And the role of the guru is to make us feel uncomfortable, as Guru Maharaj will say. Create doubts in a healthy way, make you think deeper. So that implies go through some further complexity so you get closer to your goal, but laying a proper foundation. So Tattva and Siddhanta is another example of complexity to be integrated. And all that will, if properly done, will take us to the simplicity or to the perfectly integrated complexity of Baba. From Tattva and Siddhanta, as Guru will say, that's the foundation of Baba. If you want to construct a temple of divine love in your heart, of Baba, of ecstasy, of Lila, which is a movement out of Baba, first of all, you have to do the groundwork properly, foundation stone, and that's Tattva, Siddhanta, and that implies, again, integrating complexity. So this applies for us as individual practitioners, and of course, this extends to us as a group, as a community. All of us need to integrate that, and of course, community life, that's another whole chapter. Implies a lot of this integration when dealing with others and differences and variety and diversity. All of us together on an individual level and together as a group, we need to deal with this, integrate this as a group project, as an individual project. And actually, that's what we are trying to do here in this series. Actually, externally it takes the form of Harikatha and some lecture that Swami Padmanabha will give us. But actually, we are trying here as individuals and as a group to learn how to integrate this in the best possible way so we may really get closer to our goal, really represent our legacy and tradition and the dispensation of Mahaprabhu in the best possible way, honor what's coming from the heart of our Guru into our lives, and so on. So during this month, especially this Kartik month, hopefully this is, well, not only this month, hopefully this extends to our whole life, but this may become some part of our brata in this Kartik month. So we as a unit may be focused and concentrate our energy and expectations, healthy expectations in this direction to aspire. We aspire to be a unit there, basically. We aspire to enter there as a group, as a community, as a unit in Golok, because Golok, as Guru Maharaj will say, that's a perfect community. Apart from Golok, no perfect community in this world. There you will find some relativity there, but that's relativity. Those things are there to be harmonized in order to enter the perfectly integrated community of Golok Dham. So Sri Vrindavan ki jai, Krishna Lila ki jai, Damodara-lila ki jai. So some words I want to share here. The voice recorder is showing me that it's already 1 hour and 8 minutes, so it's 108. So it's auspicious for me to put my discourse to rest here. But of course, I can be open for any questions or commentaries or something you may like to share before finishing. So if you have anything to present, to share, you can just unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, got it.
Thank you very much for your class. And while listening this lecture, I have remembered when I was traveling in December of 2017. I was traveling by bus from Vrindavan to Vishaka village. I don't remember the name, but I know that was the Vishaka village. And on the bus, I have met like sage person, you know, like he was, I don't know if he was sage, but for me, he was sage. And we were speaking like 2 hours one way and 2 hours backwards from that village. And he answered a lot of my questions, and he removed the majority of my doubts on this bhakti path, and it was like you know I was convinced that I'm on the right path at that in that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And after answering a lot of questions of mine, he as a resume he told me that I have to go into my childhood, and that there I will find all the answers. And without doing that, I will not be able to go forward on my spiritual path. And I didn't understand what he told, and I couldn't. I have tried to meditate on my childhood to go backwards, but I don't know. I just somehow I got scared or something like that. Like my child was not scary, but somehow I got scared of that because I don't know. And now when you were speaking about experiences without meaning, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that you have to find meaning for your experiences, and then and then you get restore. You said the word restore, yeah. So somehow I think that this is the same what he was telling to me, and I was totally forgotten about that. And now when you said, but again, I don't understand what you mean by that restore. So you mean that if you are doing for a long time something without meaning, it is meaningless. But if you find some meaning for that action, so then that that state of being without meaning, it becomes with meaning, or how to understand that? So that's my question, because I don't get it.
Okay. No problem. You're trying to find meaning to that. So that's and again, that's a goal. Of course, this is not an intellectual exercise, and this shouldn't be a neurosis for anyone. No, like we become kind of obsessed. Which was the meaning of that thing that happened 32 years ago? That moment at that. No, it's not something like calculated in that way. But of course, we can speak in a very in different cases and different situations. Of course, in a very extreme case, someone who has a very traumatic experience in childhood, let's say, and the person is still being haunted, if you will, by the ghosts of non-resolved past experience. You need to find. I remember, for example, this was like, I don't know, 10 years ago. I was given a lecture to a group of volunteer workers which were visiting our one farm. I was staying at that time in Argentina. So all of them were from different parts of the world. She was an Austrian girl, and she started to cry at one point in the lecture. And at the end of the lecture, she told me, I would like to speak with you for a moment. And she started to speak with me, and she told me, well, actually, I was raped when I was young. She was like 20 something. So when I was a girl, I received sexual abuse from someone. And, and what she told me was interesting. She told me, actually, what my problem is that I feel hate towards the person that did that to me. So I would like to stop hating that person. So how to, that's my suffering. Now her suffering was not so much he raped me, but I'm hating him. So that was a deep insight she had. No, and of course it's a complex situation. I don't want to with my discourse. I don't want to seem this is a cheap thing and just one lecture and everything is solved and Chen Hare Krishna be happy. Sometimes some people may even require certain professional help and guidance and therapy and so on. But of course, my answer, and I'm not a therapist, and I was seeing her for a moment, say, well, the solution, and I know it may take a time, but you need to forgive that person, basically. In that particular case, again, I'm speaking specific situation of someone who has to find meaning in the situation, in a traumatic situation that you may not even want to think about, but some purpose. So, and why the person did what he did, or whatever. No? And of course, you have to develop certain sort of compassion in the sense, okay, that person, it's not that I'm desiring that to anyone, of course, but that person was carried away by ignorance, but the gunas, you have some philosophy to understand that maybe that person was even raped himself. That happens a lot. So my point is, at some point you need to reach the point of finding a meaning in understanding why that happened on one level again, and you cannot again enter into a traumatic intellectual game where every single thing that happened in your life you are able to reach its purpose. But I am speaking about those things that you really feel this experience needs to be restored again, as I mentioned, because that's still affecting me on the present moment. So in those cases, sometimes, yeah, in psychology, they may say a lot, you have to go through your childhood, and in literal sense, because of course you may know, in those first forming years, so many things happen that in one sense affect our personality as a sponge. And if something is not in place, we may pay attention in that direction. But again, it's not that everyone has to do that. It's not that it's a must. Because if you have a good childhood, of course, there will always some things to solve. There may always some traumatic thing. You can have the perfect childhood because we are still in material realm. But it's not necessarily that, oh, maybe when I was 2 years old, there was something wrong, but I'm not able to recall what happened there. So how I will go back there? No, at one point you have to know when to stop such a journey in your mind and try to surrender to Krishna and have full faith that he will harmonize all those things, so he will be able to further enlighten me and show me whatever needs to be dealt with. Because but you, of course, you will have to do your part as best as you can. If you need that something is still waiting for, again, begging for integration from my past, okay, you can be brave enough to look in that direction and to see if something requires some fixing, if you will, in the present moment, because you cannot travel back there. But if in general terms nothing seems to be there in such a degree, if something is still there that you are not noticing, well, maybe in time it will come, or maybe that will be solved even without your noticing. That happens a lot, of course. There are many things that by the mercy of Krishna are fixed in our life, and because we are trying to surrender. But again, in some cases of devotees, they cannot fully surrender unless they face certain specific situations that are there and so on. So again, I'm giving a general answer because every single case is so single case, so individual, and that may require some further like personalized like discourse, if you will. And of course, this is not a place for that. But it's nice to hear different testimonies and experiences. So I thank you. I'm grateful for sharing your experience in going towards Vishaka Devi's village. Srimati Vishaka Devi Jai.
Yeah.
So thank you. Any other question?
Maharaj, can I just make a comment? Just to tie it into the Tatena Kumpam verse.
Activate your camera, Archan Siddhi. Please.
What?
Your camera, if you can put your camera.
Oh, my camera. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so the Tatena Kumpam verse, and in that, in the purport, I think Vishwanath Chakrabarti says something about helping, that all these sufferings that we've gone through, it's all to help us to rectify our misguided mentality. So that line in that just totally helped me so much to just see that, yeah, everything is just designed in such a way to help me have the right understanding of the purpose of life and what I'm supposed to be doing. And so it's kind of a very broad catch-all, but it's powerful. It's a really powerful statement.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was a beautiful class. I think there's people commenting on the side, just really appreciating it. And really, you hit a big chord here today.
I believe that class was beautiful as much as all of you and all of us. I included. We try to walk the talk, and I'm confident that you will try your best. So I'm grateful for that. And yes, I agree with of course, Vishwanath Thakur said and Arjun Siddhi shared with us. And that's a big challenge because basically that idea is implying whatever is coming to your life now is the best thing that could possibly be happening right now. And that's a pretty deep concept because on many occasions we feel exactly the opposite. We feel this is the worst thing that could ever be happening to me. But according to our philosophy, to the eyes of the seers, it's exactly the opposite. It's the best possible thing that could be happening to you. So if you feel the opposite, actually you are having a very nice insight in that moment. I have a long way to go in order to reach the other shore and to really be able to perceive reality with proper eyes. And that's, of course, the whole idea of having a guru and being guided by revealed knowledge, that our misguided vision will be replaced. And that's in the pranam mantra to the guru, this is implied there. There's the word used there for fitting in the Ayurvedic terms, which is the word Amgyanta Miranda Yana Amgyana Salakaya, I think. I don't know, sorry. If there's Brigu, there's some Sanskrit that may help me. But there's one word that is implied with some Ayurvedic tool that helps for fixing some problems in the eyes that do not allow you to really see things properly. Like you have cataracts or whatever. So the guru, this analogy is given here. The guru comes with that type of tool in the form of revealed knowledge and of course in the form of her personal example to restore our vision, to restore our appreciation actually of reality. Because outside, objectively, the things are the same, but your sight has been restored. So now you're able to, again, find meaning, find purpose, integrate complexity. And for that, of course, we need guidance, we need proper knowledge. And needless to say, we are extremely fortunate to be where we are, under the shade, under the shelter of our gurus, the Vaishnavas, such incredible philosophy. So the only thing lacking is, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, the only lack I think I accept is the lack of Krishna consciousness, beginning at home. So we should start trying to continue increasing our Krishna consciousness in that connection. So thank you very much, and I think I have already expressed myself quite a lot. So hopefully we spend this week trying to ruminate all these ideas. I'll try myself as well. That my homework and my commitment to the audience here. So let's all together again as a group, as a unit, continue growing in this beautiful path. And see you next Monday. As I told you, even though Kartik is finishing here in Argentina, at least on Sunday, on some countries that will finish on next Monday. So we'll take that as a nice excuse or real reason for making one more lecture since we canceled one some weeks ago. So next Monday we will have our last meeting in this series of lectures. So hopefully some interesting ideas may come. And also I was thinking if you have any topics in connection to what we are speaking, of course, that you may like that I may address in our last lecture, some specific vantage points of these ideas, please, you can share also that through maybe private message along these days. And I will try to incorporate in whatever we may be sharing in our last lecture. And of course, we have eternity to continue speaking about this unending topic. So thank you very much again for your presence and support and affection. May have you a very beautiful last week of Kartik. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Kirtan ki jai, Shri Kanuram ki jai, Kartik Brat ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premananda Haribo, Panchakalpataru Vishya Kripas Vacha, Paditanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha.